Hello and welcome to My Dietitian Journey. I'm Felicia, owner and registered dietitian at Peraz Nutrition and My Dietitian Journey. This video covers motivational interviewing, which is an evidence-based approach to behavior change. If you've not heard of motivational interviewing before, it was originally developed in the 1980s by William Miller and Steffen to help individuals who had substance use disorders. Motivational interviewing has been used in a variety of settings since then, including healthcare, education, and sports. The 2013 version of the Motivational Interviewing book by Miller and Rolnick defines MI as a collaborative, goal-oriented style of communication with particular attention to the language of change. It is designed to strengthen personal motivation for and commitment to a specific goal by eliciting and exploring the person's own reasons for change within an atmosphere of acceptance and compassion. The 2023 version defines MI as a particular way of talking with people about change and growth to strengthen their own motivation and commitment. Motivational interviewing is a person-centered and a way of being with the individual you are working with. The style of counseling with MI is guiding in the expertise of you as the dietitian is important, but so are the patient's goals and choices. We are walking alongside our patients through this process, not dragging them into change, nor just leaving a patient to figure it out on their own. Let's go over some research for motivational interviewing. There's a lot of research in support of motivational interviewing, or MI, but I want to highlight 3 studies in particular. In 2021, a quasi-experimental study was published in the Journal of Education and Health Promotion. This study compared the effectiveness of motivational interviewing and self-development education on type 2 diabetes mellitus patients' lifestyle. The results showed that patients who received motivational interviewing had significant improvement in their lifestyle as compared to patients who utilized self-development education. MI was shown to help patients control their blood sugar while improving their lifestyle. Lifestyle in this study included diet, physical activity, and also smoking. In 2021, a double-blind, parallel group randomized control trial was published in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine. This study looked at motivational interviewing in the management of type 2 diabetes mellitus and arterial hypertension in primary health care. The results of the study were that motivational interviewing was demonstrated to be useful in reducing hemoglobin A1C levels in diabetes management, and this was a more effective strategy than usual care. Another study published in the International Journal of Behavior Nutrition and Physical Activity looked at the effectiveness of MI on weight loss, physical activity, and cardiovascular disease risk factors. This was also a randomized controlled trial that included a 12-month post-intervention follow-up. Patients were randomized to the intervention group, which received standard exercise and nutrition information, plus up to 5 face-to-face MI sessions, or a minimal intervention group that only received the standard information. The intervention group that received the MI sessions received information from an exercise specialist and a registered dietitian. The focus was on exploring ambivalence and eliciting self-directed change talk. Results showed that the low-intensity MI counseling intervention was effective for long-term changes with reducing cholesterol levels and increasing walking, which was maintained at the 12-month follow-up. Let's get into more of what motivational interviewing is, starting with the spirit of MI. In previous editions of the Motivational Interviewing book, the guiding spirit of MI included partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. The 4th edition still includes partnership, acceptance, and compassion, but that evocation is now empowerment. Starting with partnership, this is really important when providing nutrition counseling. As dietitians, we are experts in the field of nutrition. However, we are not the experts of our patients and their lives. It is really easy to just shift into providing education to a patient about their chronic disease or telling them what to do to manage it. While we certainly want to provide education and suggestions, we can't just jump right into that without doing the work of understanding our patient and collaborating with them to determine what truly will work best for them. This is where the partnership comes in. Acceptance is another component of the spirit of MI. With acceptance, we are seeking to understand the patient's experiences, and we do not judge them for their past, present, or future self. Accepting a patient also means that we are accepting the fact that they may not want to change yet or at all. We need to respect the patient's right to choose, even if that isn't aligned with our own beliefs. With acceptance, we need to be empathetic. Empathy is being able to understand someone's perspective and also the deeper meanings that are not explicitly said. With empathy in counseling sessions, we don't want to impose our own perspective or overly identify with the patient because we can really end up being shut off to the patient's experience. In staying with empathy, we are actively and reflectively listening to understand meaning and perspective. Empathy allows us to then feel compassion, which is the third component of the spirit of MI. With compassion, we are actively trying to prioritize the patient's well-being. We are acting in the best interest of our patients. Compassion and empathy go hand in hand because we are trying to understand our patients' experiences, but there is a difference. Psychology Today describes the difference as empathy allows us to take the perspective of another person and feel the emotions of another person. Compassion emerges when those empathetic thoughts and feelings include a commitment to help. The fourth component of the spirit of MI, according to the 2023 edition of the Motivational Interviewing book by Miller and Rolnick, is empowerment, which again has been changed from evocation. With empowerment, we are encouraging patients to share beliefs, values, motivations, and more, all without the fear of judgment from us, the practitioner. Through empowerment, we are also working with an individual to increase self-efficacy and confidence in themselves. Motivational interviewing also includes core engaging skills, which are open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries known as the OARS. Open-ended questions are those that allow the patient to share more details and elaborate. We are inviting patients to talk more. Close-ended questions are those that end with a yes or no response or minimal answer. Close-ended questions put the patient in more of a passive role. Do you exercise is an example of a closed-ended question versus what does your exercise routine look like? Or tell me about your current level of activity. We really want to strive for more open-ended questions. However, that does not mean that we shouldn't ever use closed-ended questions because these can really be useful as well. Open-ended questions can be useful in a lot of ways. We can use these to understand the patient's goals, like asking, what do you hope to achieve from our session today? We can also expand the conversation with something like, in what ways has journaling been helpful for you? Or tell me more about your current exercise routine. We can also use open-ended questions to identify strengths, like what helped you to lose weight in the past? Or what helped you to manage your blood sugar in the past? We can also explore next steps and actions with questions like, what could you do? Or what could be the first step? Sometimes if I feel like I'm getting stuck in a conversation and not sure where to go next, I would say something like, I'm wondering where you might want to go from here. What are your thoughts on what might be the most helpful? All in all, these open-ended questions help us to draw out information from a patient, really explore their perspectives and ideas, and engage them in the session. Affirmations are the next component of the OARS. With an affirmation, we are highlighting strengths or what we might appreciate. We can affirm efforts to help the patient build confidence in their ability to follow through change. There are two different types of affirmations, simple and complex. A simple reflection is more specific to what the patient has done well. An example is, you knew that would be helpful and you did it, or you explained that well. A complex affirmation is when we highlight strengths or even positive characteristics. An example could be, you're someone that your family can really rely on. Something important about affirmations is that they should not include the word I. We want to make it about the patient, not ourselves, and leave praise out of it. Also, we want to make sure any affirmation is genuine as well. An affirmation can often be a reflection, which is next in the OARS acronym. A reflection is a statement we make after actively listening to a patient, and it is a way to repeat, rephrase, or even offer a deeper guess about what the patient is trying to communicate. Outside of verbal reflections, we can also reflect by our body language or nonverbal cues. With any reflection, we want to say it in a neutral manner. Reflections can be utilized in many ways in a session. We can reflect after we ask open-ended questions and the patient responds. We can reflect when we hear a strong feeling or when we are sensing resistance. Reflections can be simple or complex. With simple reflections, we are basically repeating what the individual has said without adding too much to what was already shared. An example could be if a patient says, "I don't want to stop eating fast food," and your response is, "You don't think that avoiding fast food will work for you right now." With complex reflections, we are making a guess about the meaning behind what the patient is saying or extending the conversation. There are different types of complex reflections. Double-sided, amplified, and agreeing with a twist are just 3 examples. Double-sided reflections are when we reflect both sides of the client's ambivalence. We might say, "You have identified that work is a barrier to exercise, and is it important for you to incorporate movement into your day?" The "and" is important because using "but" can undermine or invalidate the first part of what was said. Usually, if I'm sharing a double-sided reflection, I start with the barrier or the negative and end with the positive or change talk because that is the last thing that the patient hears. Agreeing with a twist is when we agree with what the patient has said, but with a slight change of direction that can help move the conversation forward. An example could be if the patient says, "I know I should cook more at home and I really like to cook, but I just don't have the time and my husband is not supportive." Agreeing with a twist could look like, "You like cooking and haven't found a way to fit it into your schedule." Amplified reflections are those that are said in an exaggerated form, but without any sarcasm. The idea behind an amplified reflection is to try and elicit change talk, or the patient arguing for change. An example of this could be if the patient says, "I don't know why everyone in my family is so worried about my diabetes. I don't eat fast food every week or sweets all the time." An amplified reflection could be, "Your family is worrying needlessly." Another example is if the patient says, "I just don't have any time to exercise. I'm so busy with work." An amplified reflection could be, "It's impossible to fit exercise into your day." The concern I have with amplified reflections is that they can prompt a patient to agree with me and voice sustained talk. Sustained talk is when a patient is voicing a reason not to change. There are a lot of ways to move forward in a conversation when you hear sustained talk, one being silence, and another using the open-ended questions to try and elicit change talk. Because of the risk of potentially having a patient voice more sustained talk in a session, I tend not to utilize these as much as other complex reflections. Summarizing is the last part of the OARS acronym. Summaries can be utilized in multiple ways in a session. You can start a session with a summary, providing an overview from the last session or the current one with what to expect. We can summarize in the middle of a session to pull together pieces of the conversation. We might say something like, "Let's recap on what we talked about so far," or we might say, "So far we've talked about label reading, how to go about building a healthy snack, and also the importance of fiber. You shared that having an afternoon snack could be a way for you to get in an extra serving of fruit for the day. What else might be helpful for us to review together?" With this, I am summarizing the conversation, highlighting a potential action, and then ending with an open-ended question to keep the conversation going. A summary can be really powerful and impactful for the individual, depending on what we include. For example, if we summarize accomplishments, this can be really motivating for the patient to hear. We can also utilize a summary at the end of a session to reinforce key points and also ensure understanding. I've heard this as being referred to as a bouquet of flowers. Each flower represents a topic of conversation in the session, change talk, or action steps. Another important piece of motivational interviewing are the 4 processes or tasks. These include engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. Engaging happens first and also throughout the session. Engaging is critical to being able to establish a relationship with your patient that is collaborative and trusting. It can be really easy to just jump right into education or even spending time clarifying paperwork. Again, while all of this is important, if we don't first engage with our patients, we can create some resistance or discord in the session. Engaging involves helping the patient to feel comfortable, building rapport with them, and empathetically listening. We are really seeking to understand our patient. What brought them into the session? What are they hoping to achieve? Engaging is not just one question and we move on. It really is a process. Engaging in the beginning of the session can include a brief welcome and a summary of the session. For example, "Hi Judy, I'm Felicia, the registered dietitian. We have about 60 minutes for today's session. Typically, a first session involves a closer look at your history, what brought you in for counseling, and a co-creation of a plan or next steps. Before we move any further, I wanted to get an understanding of what brought you in for nutrition counseling. Can you tell me a little bit about what you were hoping to achieve from our time together?" Like I mentioned earlier, engaging is important throughout the session. This means utilizing those open-ended questions to keep this more collaborative versus more direct. Engaging is so important because it lays the foundation for the partnership you are building with the patient long-term. The second process or task in MI is focusing. Focusing is determining where you are going in not only that specific session, but in counseling as a whole. We want to make sure we know what the focus is so we know how to best proceed. In some cases, we may know what the focus will likely be overall with the paperwork we would have the patient fill out. I might already know the patient wants to manage diabetes or lose weight. What I don't know are the specifics of what they have tried or the knowledge they have about a certain topic. I also don't know how I can best help until I actually have a conversation with them. With focusing, we want to make sure the direction of the session is shared, which means we are not just directing everything that's happening. It doesn't mean we can't provide a framework or ideas. We just want to make sure that we are giving space for our patients to bring their own ideas and topics of concern and also be able to accept or reject ours. Usually with finding focus, I want to identify both the macro focus or long-term goal or target, and the micro focus, which would be more short-term or session by session. For new patients, I might use an open-ended question like, "What are you hoping to achieve from nutrition counseling?" I also might say, "What made you interested in working with a registered dietitian?" If in need of a particular tool, wellness visions or using the dimension of wellness can also be useful for guiding the conversation. When identifying a micro focus for a session, I might say something like, "What would be the most helpful topic for us to focus on today?" If I'm reviewing someone's food log in a session, I usually discuss what stands out to them with their intake. At some point in the conversation, I might say, "Thinking about the different areas you want to work on, which do you feel like is the one you are most ready to focus on now?" Or, "What would you like to work on first?" Then we can move forward with maybe brainstorming, education, and or goal setting depending on the conversation. The focus for a patient may change over time or even within a session, so it is important to be actively listening to see how you might need to adjust. Evoking is the third process or task in MI, and this is where we explore the why behind the change. We elicit our patients' ideas and motivations, paying special attention to change talk or the reasons someone wants to change. We can't really move effectively into evoking until we have a clear focus. With evoking, we are utilizing many times specific open-ended questions to bring forth strengths, wisdoms, reflection, and also summaries. We can ask an open-ended question to evoke importance or a goal or ideas from the patient. We might also be evoking in the beginning of a session when we are asking what brought the patient in to the session. One thing to be very mindful of is not asking leading questions to try and get a specific answer to what we want. Again, we want to be a partnership. An example could be, "Won't you have more energy if you start eating better?" Asking the question in this way can bring up some resistance in the session. A patient might start to argue or feel the need to explain why they can't eat better. Basically, we are seeing the opposite of the change talk for behavior change. A better way to phrase this question could be, "What are some reasons why healthy eating is important to you?" With this, we are trying to evoke motivation for the change. The last process or step with MI is planning. With planning, we are looking at the how behind the behavior change. It is important to avoid pushing a patient into the planning process if they are not ready or willing to yet. Sometimes our patients might be ready for change and we could start planning in the first session. Sometimes it takes more sessions and more of a process to get to a plan. We might be spending more time in what I call the information gathering phase, identifying their areas of focus, building awareness of their current behaviors, maybe even reviewing some education. In the planning process, we are developing steps or actions that are based on the individual's expertise and strengths. Basically, we want to make sure the plan is devised in a way that matches where the patient has been and what is feasible next. The planning process is also not the end. Once a patient is implementing their behavior change, roadblocks can come up, which is very natural. Something else important about the planning phase is that we want the patient to be talking about their plan. We don't want to be the ones that are coming up with the plan and telling them what to do. The more we can engage the patient in the process and the more they talk about the plan, the more likely they are to follow through with it. If we are in the planning process and there is some resistance or reluctance from the patient, we want to take a step back and evoke. We might be rushing into planning too soon. We may need to re-engage with the patient. We might even need to shift the focus based on what's being said. With that said, it's important to note that the processes of engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning are not necessarily linear. In summary, motivational interviewing is a guiding style, person-centered way of being with the individual you are working with. The spirit of MI includes partnership, acceptance, compassion, and empowerment, formerly evocation. Core skills involved with MI include the OARS, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. Both the skills and spirit are intertwined with the processes or tasks, which are engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. All in all, motivational interviewing is an important and effective strategy for working with individuals through behavior changes. Thanks for listening, and be sure to leave a comment if you have questions and subscribe for more content.